Amen, say man. This is the A-Man Show, back at it again for more content. So the 49ers has been the most talented NFL team throughout the last two seasons, and they still come up short. The Niners in the last 5 years have many opportunities to even win multiple Super Bowls within that period, but somehow in some way the 49ers keep on coming up short to expectations. And it's been a trend where the 49ers either choke or have key players injured at the wrong time. That will prevent them from getting the Lombardi trophy. With free agency in the come up, San Francisco is now in a tough position where they have to possibly get rid of Brandon Ayuk, as well as sign Brock Purdy to a major contract extension or whatnot. As well as the conference in strengthening, it's becoming more unlikely for this team to win it all as it did in previous seasons. So in this video, we're finna discuss how San Francisco keeps on failing to win a Super Bowl throughout the last 5 years. But first, y'all know what to do. Make sure y'all subscribe. I post NBA and NFL content. Turn on post notifications so that way y'all don't miss anything new from me. Anyways, stay tuned and let's get the video started. The Kyle Shanahan era officially started in the 2017 offseason, where he became the next head coach for the 49ers after the debacle with Chip Kelly the previous year. In the first two seasons, they struggled to stay within a 500 record, but during that stretch, the 49ers would draft George Kittle in the 5th round in 2017, and in the next year, will select Mike McGlinchey, Fred Warner, and DJ Reed, who will be important players later down the line. In the 2018 offseason, the Niners signed Richard Sherman in a 3-year, $39 million deal. The Niners went 4-12, and in the beginning was led by Nick Mullins as QB. Jimmy Garoppolo, their former franchise QB, of which they traded in the year prior, was injured for the majority of the year. Despite that, George Kittle has broken out as a top 3 tight end in the game, let alone one of the more versatile offensive players in the league, who will make a Pro Bowl along with making second team All-Pro honors. His breakout season still remains as his best individual year of his career, because after that, he will no longer put up as great statistically as he did in 2018 because of the other guys that have also broken out and became top players at their position. But focusing on the 2018 season, mainly the defensive side of the ball, DeForest Buckner had a career year. Fred Warner has shown some potential as a versatile linebacker, and because of their below 500 record, they were rewarded with the 2nd overall pick in the 2019 draft, in which they will select Nick Bosa. Later in the draft, they will select Deebo Samuel in the 2nd round, and all the way into the 5th round will select Dre Greenlaw. Not only they scored big in the draft, but they added another pass rusher in Dee Ford from the Chiefs by trade. With all the talent they accumulated over the last 2 years, this along with Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh improvement as coaches, the 49ers are due for a breakout season, and in the 2019 season was just that. The Niners went 13-3 and had the best record in the entire NFL. Started the season 8-0, which they haven't done since the Joe Montana Steve Young era. Offensively speaking, they were 2nd in scoring, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and they were one of the fastest teams in the league. Defensively, they were among the top 10 in total defense, turnovers, passing defense, and sacks. This team had 4 Pro Bowlers, one being Defensive Rookie of the Year, and in the postseason, they absolutely dominated, especially in the NFC Championship game, where they beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers with just the running game and along with a stifling defense. But in the Super Bowl, that's when shit goes down the drain for the Niners. Going into the second half, the Niners had a 20-10 lead against the Chiefs, but the shitty play with Garoppolo in the second, along with Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes, and the defense ain't doing anything to stop Tyreek Hill, is what ultimately led them losing to the Chiefs. Now, going into the 2020 offseason, they made the move to trade a couple of picks to get Trent Williams from Washington to replace Joe Staley. They also drafted Brandon Ayuk with the 25th overall pick. They also traded DeForest Buckner for the 14th overall pick of that year's draft, in which they will select Javon Kinlaw, who will later become a bust or is becoming a bust. Never understood really why they did this trade. But anyways, the 49ers in 2020 will pretty much have a gap year as the majority of the players will get injured and will go 6-10. But the following year is where they picked them from where they left off in the 2019 season. Firstly, they drafted Trey Lance as the second overall pick, in which they traded up with the Miami Dolphins in a large deal that will bite them on the ass later on. Trey Lance will barely play and Jimmy Garoppolo will remain as the starter even though he's worse than ever before. They will go 10-7, which is less than the 2019 season because of their slow start of starting the year 2-3. But luckily, they finished the season by being ranked top 10 in total offense and defense. Offensively, they averaged 376 yards per game, which is 8th in the league, and defensively, they only allowed 310 yards per game, which ranks them 3rd in the league. Deebo Samuel specifically had a breakout year and became a top 10 player at his position. Nick Bosa will become an elite pass rusher in the game. Fred Warner will become the best linebacker in the league. Surprisingly, the Niners made their second NFC Championship game in 3 years despite Jimmy Garoppolo being fucking anus throughout the playoffs, and even defeating an MVP-led Aaron Rodgers in the divisional. But the high-powered Rams team wasn't going to back down against the Niners, even though they tried to mount a comeback in the second half after being down by 17. But Jimmy Garoppolo, or Shitty Garoppolo, threw away the game in the last 2 minutes of the game. Thus, the Niners fell short once again. So off the offseason we go, where in free agency they signed Charvarius Ward, who will be a very good corner for them, and in the draft is where they get their franchise QB and Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy. With all the talent retained, there weren't that many moves they needed to make this offseason. That, along with Trey Lance coming back from injury, there was so much to look forward to going into the 22 season. And Trey Lance's first NFL game starting, he looked very iffy, inexperienced, and confused out there. He was making a lot of rookie mistakes and didn't look ready to produce for this Niners team. It also didn't help that the guy will suffer a season-ending fibula fracture in the first quarter against the Seahawks in Week 2. Then Shitty Garoppolo will fill in for Trey Lance once again, and the Niners will have another slow start into the season. And hell, offensively speaking, they were very stale. But by the trade deadline, the Niners will make a blockbuster deal to send multiple second, third, and fourth round future picks to Carolina in exchange for Christian McCaffrey. And that will be really huge for the Niners for the remainder of the season, because since then, they will win every single game throughout. Despite Jimmy Garoppolo's injury, Brock Purdy fills in as the starter and makes them 10 times more dominant. And of course, the Niners will continue on that 10-win winning streak. Once again, the Niners will have another 10-plus win season, going 13-4. They will have a top 5 offense in the league, and defensively, this may be arguably the best defense they had in franchise history, being first in total defense, in defensive scoring as well, led by Nick Bosa, who was the Defensive Player of the Year, and also Fred Warner, who made first-team All-Pro along with Talanoa Hufanga. And of course, they were the front-runners along with the Eagles to win that year's Super Bowl. In the postseason, dominated against the Seahawks, and then in the divisional, faced the Cowboys, in which they took care of business at home in a tough game, and then onto their third NFC Championship appearance in 4 years. As you know, the Eagles fired away in the first quarter, then at the second, Brock Purdy injured his throwing arm, and he will be out for the remainder of the game. And then the Eagles will take advantage of that, blowing out the Niners 31-7. What could have happened if Brock Purdy didn't get injured in that game? We'll never know. Going into the 23 offseason is where the Niners continue to bolster this unit, signing Devon Hargrave to a 5-year, $84 million deal, and drafting key role players such as Jair Brown, and extending Nick Bosa to a 5-year, $170 million deal. Throughout the offseason, there were many uncertainty QB position, specifically Brock Purdy, whether he can win with him as QB because Trey Lance is still there along with Sam Darnold. So Brock Purdy has a lot to prove going into the season, whether he can beat the franchise guy. Eventually, Purdy beats all of them, including Trey Lance, especially how poorly he was in the preseason. Like the previous season, the Niners will go on for another 10-plus win season, becoming the first seed in the NFC. Offensively, they are the most dominant they've been throughout the Shanahan era, having 3 1,000-yard receivers, 1 Offensive Player of the Year in Christian McCaffrey, and a defense that is more talented than ever before, but somehow, someway, they gotten worse because of new DC Steve Wilkes. The Niners will come back from large deficits in the postseason and make it to their second Super Bowl appearance in 5 years, while they will face, once again, the Kansas City Chiefs. The same story despite having an actual QB in Brock Purdy, 10-3 going into the second half, but then again, Kansas City bounced back and they tied the game before winning the whole thing in overtime. And that sums up the San Francisco 49ers. They have been among the best in the NFC for the majority of the 5 years. And with that talent they have at their disposal, just could not get over the hump. For Kyle Shanahan specifically, the man's legacy is defined as the coach that never signed 3 when maintaining leads, especially in the Super Bowl. And it's awfully due to the fact that the man makes uncharacteristic decisions when the sun is hitting him the brightest, and never makes adjustments or does make adjustments but at the wrong time. And that's what happened in Super Bowl 58. Kyle Shanahan insisted on calling too many passing plays instead of running the football with Christian McCaffrey, and that block kicked is what turned the tide of the game. And also injuries of Dre Greenlaw and at times Deebo Samuel and George Kittle has also affected the 49ers in that game. So looking at San Fran, how did they consistently underachieve in the last 5 years? Well, one is of course choking and also adding injuries as well, but most of it has to be choking, am I right? Yeah, sure, Kyle Shanahan had to deal with a QB with a Jimmy Garoppolo, especially at his worst, but then again, you were up 20-10 in Super Bowl 54, and then 4 Super Bowls later, you had an actual QB in Brock Purdy, who proven time and time and again that he's more than a game manager, let alone a top QB in the league, and you still couldn't get it done. And at a certain point, we have to take this to account when talking about Kyle Shanahan, because throughout the regular season, we can talk about how great of an offensive mind Shanahan is and how innovative he is regarding his play design goes, how great this offense is in general. But what good is it to have a great offense, let alone team that is dominant but couldn't win the Super Bowl? And eventually the front office is going to get to a point where they might have to come with terms with Shanahan. Guess what, guys? The NFC is not going to get easier from this day forward. The Lions, from just 3 seasons of rebuilding, have already made it to the conference championship game, along with a 12-5 record. You also have the Packers that are on the come up, and the Eagles are retooling, and they will be back from where they started in the 22 season. The LA Rams are also a threat. The Niners are not only facing a much tougher conference next season, but the roster may potentially get worse because Brandon Ayuk might get traded after being unhappy with his role, especially in the Super Bowl. And also you have to pay your QB in Purdy on a max extension. It's only going to get tougher for the 49ers as time moves forward, and the Super Bowl window for them is dwindling right now. So in conclusion, the Niners have consistently underachieved for the past 5 years and never get over the hump, and it's only going to get tougher for the Niners to get back to the Super Bowl with roster changes along with the conference getting tougher. Now, they're not as bad as the Killer Bee Steelers, but this Niners team is getting up there. Thank y'all for watching the video. What are your thoughts on this vid? Is San Fran among the most underachieving talented teams in NFL history? Let me know in the comment section below, and make sure y'all subscribe. Road to 1,000 subs, turn on post notifications, and that is all. Stay litty. This is the A-Man Show. Sign out.